Welcome to the Immigration Lawyers Podcast. I am the host, Attorney John Khosravi, and I practice U.S. immigration law exclusively. For more information about the program, please visit www.immigrationlawyerspodcast.com. Please note that this recording is informational only and does not constitute legal advice. Please consult with a licensed attorney for specific legal guidance that suits your case. Also, this recording is copyrighted and written permission is required for rebroadcasting. For more information about me, please visit www.jqqlaw.com. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining episode 101 of the Immigration Lawyers Podcast. I have a great attorney, a really established attorney, Samir Khedekar. I'm kind of pronouncing it with a Persian black accent.
I like that. Well, I grew up with Persians, John, so I'm really used to that pronunciation.
Samir Khedekar, or Khedekar. My last name is Khosravi, but I have to say Khosravi because you can't say the Ches in English. But, Samir has like great experience in, high volume corporate immigration, but now he started his own firm and going a different route. And so I just want to get to know him and his experience because I think it could help a lot of people in this field just to know how the immigration law is. Now, after I spoke with Samir the first time, I started researching and learning about big law when it comes to immigration. And then there's whole world of activity going along that, us solo and small people didn't even realize happening with the big firms and their competitions and what's going on with the accounting firms internationally. There's all this kind of stuff that's kind of crazy going on. But with that, Samir, thanks for coming to the show. Just let us know about yourself and where you came up, where you grew up, and how you got into immigration law.
Oh, yeah. Well, the story that I tell a lot of people when they ask about my relationship to immigration is my parents were living in LA before I was born. And my mom went back to India to have me, which is the opposite of what most people try to do. So I was born in India and came back as a little baby and had a green card for 30-something years. And then basically when I became an attorney, I had to file for my own citizenship. But that's actually not how I became a lawyer. After law school, I went to law school in Santa Clara. And I met my wife there and decided to stay in the Bay Area. I didn't know what I wanted to do, right? So I fell into working for a small immigration firm out of law school, where I really hit it off with the owner and one of their associates who's now one of my long-term best friends. And that's where I learned immigration, basically did everything, drafted my own forms, did asylum work, did employment-based work. Then I went to another small firm where I learned a lot about E2s and investor work. And then I ended up at Pearl Law Group, which was where I was for the next almost 14 years, actually, and culminating as my position as managing partner there.
Awesome. So let's back it up. One thing that's really good, and I had the same thing, is when you're starting immigration law to do everything to see the whole system, if you can get away with getting some experience like that and having someone to help you. And when you're doing that, did you have an inkling or feeling that you like the employment and corporate-based immigration more? Or when you went to Pearl, did you just kind of fall into that?
No, for sure. It was pretty clear to me from the outset. I definitely liked it more. And I also, I was not good at the removal stuff. Like I knew what my weaknesses were too. I ended up being just a lot better at talking to clients and kind of doing like the consultations and kind of walking them through the employment-based process, which I found to be more intuitive, kind of based on how my brain worked, right? And so I just kind of was slotted into that pretty early on, and I really, really enjoyed it. And that's kind of what the focus of my work has been since then.
Interesting. So then you got through those first two firms, and then you started with Pearl. Now, Pearl, for those who don't know, is one of the larger immigration firms. Not fragment size, but it's in league with them when it comes to volume and the type of corporate clientele they have. How was that firm size-wise and stuff when you started there?
Well, compared to where it was now, it was small. It was me and a couple other attorneys. Julie Pearl is the founding partner there, and one of my colleagues who's still there. It was three of us. It'd be about 25 employees total. But they had a really sophisticated client base, the kind of clients that you would expect from a firm like Fragaman or Reopman Light and firms like that. And so that was really exciting to me. But over the next 13 years, we grew considerably.
How is that process? So just talk me through how a company grows that. Was that always the goal to grow that fast, or just would happen on its own?
I think, it depends on the company, I would say. Maybe some companies have a really kind of like high growth, like kind of a goal and kind of just where they want to be. For us, it was more about steady growth, not growth for growth's sake. but meeting the needs of our clients and our employees. And, you know, employees kind of want to see some growth to support their career trajectories, right? And so, and then of course, as you know, John, as anybody who has their own firm or works in a small firm knows, like, as you start, you know, working with companies or clients, and as they like you more, they start referring you out, you start getting more business, and growth is pretty much inevitable, right? So, so we tried to grow like a 10 to 20% rate if we could. And that's, sometimes it was a lot more than that, and really just not necessarily kind of within our control.
What are the growing pains you have when you're growing, especially, you know, considerably? What kind of the law is the law, but as a business, what kind of headaches did you have?
Oh, for sure. I think the hardest thing was scaling with staff, employees and staff, and just making sure that we were able to hire good people, because really, like, your reputation is built on kind of your quality and your responsiveness and what kind of service do you provide, right? And that really comes down to hiring the best people. And one of the lessons that I learned, the hard lessons I learned early on, was like, you cannot get desperate about who you hire, especially even when you grow really fast. You can't just slot bodies in there, because like that could really backfire like terribly. And it did a couple times for me. Like I made some pretty big mistakes in hiring, but that's how you learn, right? And so never compromise quality, always, you know, hire for the best. And we learned just kind of how to just conduct ongoing recruitment, even when we didn't need people, just to make sure that we had a pipeline of really good people when we did.
That's interesting. Yeah, that ongoing recruitment, that's really important. Even when you don't, I think the guy I was watching his video with head of HR from LinkedIn or Netflix actually, and they're like, they're always have a pipeline of hiring to replace anybody who's there, because if, you know, they come down sick or get in a car accident, God forbid, they need to replace that person. So I always have an eye on potential talent coming in. Who knows, you might not need the person, but someone's so talented, you might want to bring him in just to do it. You know, that stuff happens. So what is some key tips of hiring? That's like, for me, that's been the scariest thing. Of one of the intentional reasons I haven't been expanding my firms, is like hiring is such a nightmare. What are some tips about hiring and maintaining good employees?
Yeah, and at some point you can even just like start Googling like, you know, tips for hiring the right person. And a lot of these like these mandates or these like kind of concepts people come up with are true. The hard part is like figuring them out in the course of an interview, right? Because people are always putting their best foot forward, as they should, and you're not necessarily picking up on the red flags either in their background or in the resume during the course of the interview. So one of the things that I learned to do well there was to really kind of pick that out in resumes, kind of figure out where the problem spots might be, just by, you know, how many jobs have they had in the last like 6 years? Like, have they spent more than 2 years at a job or not, right? Like, what was the reason there? There's always going to be a reason why they change, and they can often be legitimate reasons, right? But more often than not, like sometimes you get people who just don't like being at one place for very long, right? And that could be a problem if you're trying to hire for a long-term position. So it's just things like that, right? Finding somebody who's, you know, stayed at a place for a long time, 2-3 years, maybe 4 years if you can in this day and age. And also, like, what have they done that's just been kind of above and beyond? Like, are they able to articulate something they've done that just wasn't just expected by their company, but was kind of like proactive? They took a lot of initiative, and it really kind of displays their passion for what they do, and their ability just to kind of be a leader, like, amongst their colleagues. So that's the kind of stuff that we look for.
And how do you test to see if they actually know how to file an I-140 or something, or do you just take their word at it?
Yeah. Oh, no. Well, we would, so it really, I mean, once again, every firm kind of does their interviews differently. One good way of doing it would be just to have your different subject matter experts come in and meet the person. Obviously, for a fit, you want a good cultural fit. You want somebody who is a good team player and you can get along with. You spend most of your waking hours with that person. But also, like, I would have my top paralegals come in and start quizzing them, you know, on kind of how they file, like what is their process, like, do they even, because the paralegals knew much more about that than I did, right? And so I'd want them quizzing them and kind of getting a real sense of how they work in the trenches on a day-to-day basis.
Now, I think Pearl has all sorts of technology that they use to streamline this kind of stuff, even proprietary technology. But what kind of systems do you usually have in place and protocols when you have like a high volume firm? Because, small ones, the attorney and a paralegal work together, they do it. But when you're doing kind of numbers, is there like multiple systems that check on stuff? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the most part, the technology would be the same. There's a few major companies that are licensing their software to law firms, right? And I think for the most part, you can use any one of those companies at a low volume or a high volume firm. I think it's just the way you use it is different, right? Maybe at a smaller firm, you're using it more for kind of filling out forms, right? Maybe billing or whatever it is that small firms do. And at a larger firm, you have to make sure that all the data is in there because you do a lot of reporting on various kinds of fields. You do data analysis, you do expiration reports. Can you imagine having like thousands and thousands of employees at one of your clients, right? If you miss one expiration, it's your fault. So you really, really have to get good at the data entry, the data integrity, and the constant reporting, the organization, and the kind of the process around making sure that you're checking up on this at given intervals.
Interesting. So what kind of issues, I mean, like with the volume you guys do at your corporate, was the 2018 H-1B debacle with USCIS, was that a complete nightmare for a firm that does high volume with those?
So are you talking about like RFEs and
RFEs and then not adjudicating, and then the companies are frustrated, like what's going on? They might blame you for the RFEs, not knowing it's just USCIS policy.
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess my take is one of the only good things that has come out of this administration is that I think people have a lot more respect for what we do as immigration lawyers, and they're more aware of the complexities, right? And the difficulties that are kind of thrown in our way, right? So, we did a lot of kind of proactive like messaging around the changes that are happening before the H-1B cap season, right? And all the different things that governments are going to try to do to make it harder for them. So when they started happening, it wasn't so much of a surprise. And if you have kind of a proactive approach around it, if you try to help as much as possible, if you have positive messaging to the employee, to the HR, to the employees' managers, if you're perceived as somebody who's trying to solve a problem rather than someone who's trying to not be blamed for that problem, right? I think that went a long way in us being appreciated, and I think that's probably the right way to handle it.
Yeah, one of the positive aspects of President Trump is that for immigration is the fact that our clients have much more understanding of this stuff when things go bad. Under Obama, even though there was a lot of annoyances that would happen with DHS, USCIS, people just say, Obama loves immigrants. Like, oh, not really. One still have problems. Not as bad as it is right now, but it was still having these kind of issues. So, H-1B they're going to be changing the system. Did they confirm, do you know if they're going to change it for this coming year?
So they're implementing the pre-registration. Well, they already changed kind of how they count the cases under the lottery, right? Like they give a preference to master's cap versus the bachelor's degree holders this year. So they already instituted that. But next year they're going to institute the pre-registration process, which we'll see how that goes. There's probably going to be a cost associated with that and a fee for that. And I don't think they've told us exactly how that's going to work yet. So we're all waiting here.
Yeah, and I was, at first I was like, well, it kind of may help employers so they don't have to pay the whole lawyer fee for H-1B if you're not going to file it. But then again, if you're going to do a pre-registration, the lawyer has to do a lot of the work beforehand if it is selected, so they'll know if it's a good case or not. So there's going to be a decent amount of lawyer involvement in that anyways. And I'm sure it's going to be a nightmare. I'm not optimistic that this rapid change is going to do something positive, but that's a mess. So one thing that happens when you're working with large corporations or high volume kind of clients, it's completely different than working on a one-on-one or with even a small company. Who's the person you deal with, and how do you manage that relationship, which might be for an HR for a big tech company or something like that? And how do you deal with all those issues of having these third parties involved and who's managing it? Just let me know more about that stuff.
Every company is different, John. I would say the most typical scenario in a large company is that you have a global mobility department kind of within the HR organization, the overall HR organization. So these are HR professionals, usually with a deep background in HR and process and technology, and they're usually very smart and good at what they do. And then kind of within the mobility structure, you have people that specialize in immigration, relocation, tax, and all these different kind of considerations. And then within immigration, especially in big companies, you have people that could be specializing in U.S. immigration, and people who specialize in global or just kind of various regional parts of the world based on where the company is.
Mm-hmm.
So once again, it could just be a company that has nobody, right? It could be like a fairly big program, and they have this one HR person who's in charge of it and has very little experience in immigration, and it's just kind of like over their head, right? So understandably, obviously, you imagine having to manage a program of immigration of 500 employees when you don't have that much experience. I think the first tactic is to kind of figure out where are they at, like what is their knowledge base, like how do they work, what is the communication structure between the various people within your department, who is the person that you're going to liaise with the most, and make sure you meet them in person, because once you have that kind of face-to-face communication and just kind of connection established, it really makes it a lot easier going forward. So I don't know if that answered your question or not.
That comes in really important meeting a person. So like for my L1s, when I get hired or it looks like it's going to go forward, I'll fly out to their location, pretty much wherever they are in the U.S., to just meet the people once, because that's going to be a high net worth client that's going to be repeating a lot of money. It's worth the cost of flying down, the time, and you understand their business so much better just talking to them in person as opposed to phone calls or even videos. It's just something that comes along with that. And so, like, there's just so much going on with a large company like that. What kind of volumes are you looking at when you're dealing with, like, I don't know, you don't have to say your clientele that you have, but I mean, is it like all of a sudden 500 H-1Bs in a season, or is that even little? How does that?
Yeah, I mean, without naming names, and I don't even have to speak about my particular clients. And as a matter of fact, I think all this information is like accessible.
It is public now, yeah. Especially Trump on L's and H made that public, yeah.
That's right, yeah. But that being said, all the companies that you've heard of, the Googles, the Facebooks, companies like that, they generally file close to probably at least several hundred, if not 1,000 cap cases a year, right? There's a lot. And then they have programs of 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 foreign nationals as employees at any given time, right? So it's a lot. It's a lot to manage. Takes serious organizational skills if you're HR in charge of that, and serious kind of project management skills, in my opinion.
Have you seen, in your experience, companies seeing the difficulties in H's, send their clients to Canada to work for a year so that they could pull off an L1 afterwards? Is that commonplace?
Yeah, I think the companies that are well established in other parts of the world, that's always a backup plan. If it's, the consideration is it in conformance with their overall kind of mobility policy to be able to do that? Because if they do that, then they got to invoke the services of their counterparts in that country. Let's say it's Canada or some other UK or whatever it is. There's costs associated with that, moving the employee out there and doing all the tax equalization, all the stuff that happens there. And then they have to leave a job open for them to come back after a year, right? So can you imagine, like, if you left the company, but leave a job open for me for a year, I'll come back in a year. It's kind of an odd concept, but fairly normal in our context.
Yeah.
But in the overall HR context, it's kind of an odd one, right? So these are some of the issues that they often have to grapple with.
And so you said there's usually a point person in the company. If your rivals were going to be poaching, because it's a small community that can handle these kind of volumes, so it's not that many firms. Is that the person that each of them are trying to like schmooze and try to meet with and try to poach them and have them use their firm? Is that kind of tactics come to place, or how much turnover is there in these large corporations with legal counsel?
Yeah, I mean, well, once again, all over the place, but I would say, the typical, they have contracts. I mean, you go out to bid for a company, and let's say you win, you're awarded a contract, and that contract is finite. It's generally 2 years, maybe 3. And the companies do that because they're required by their procurement departments to kind of come back and kind of kick tires every couple of years to make sure they're getting the best deals, right? Now, the reality of it is, I mean, if you have a relationship that's really working well, right? And the HR contact and the law firm have worked well together and they're doing well by the company, then that relationship can last for a long time. And I've seen, it can be like 10, 12, or even more years. It's really depending on the
Yeah, unless they want to be super cheap, it's not worth destroying a relationship where you know that works just to save a couple of bucks if they're wise enough. And I imagine a lot of these big companies have more longer term thought process not to do something like that. But yeah, it's competitive because if you're doing that kind of volume, you have to have a staff that could handle it, and that means you have massive overhead. And so you got to produce. There's no ways about it. You got to constantly, bring in business and grow. It becomes like a treadmill of sorts. Is that how it is, or am I kind of overstating it?
Yeah, I mean, I think once again, there is a tremendous human element to all of this too, right? Um, Maybe you don't get to know the employees as well as you'd like because there's like 1,000 of them, right? The time multiplied by all the different clients that you have. But really, kind of getting to know your HR contact clients can be very personal. They're often tremendous advocates for their employees as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, when it comes to the cases, when it comes to the petitions, and many of them can be very similar to each other in terms of the job, like the jobs descriptions don't vary quite often in most tech companies, and so there are economies of scale there that you can help make you more efficient as time goes on. But I would say there is a huge human element to it too.
So with specifically regard to some of these categories, have you seen more issues like Trump made TN category for economists really restrictive? Were you handling a lot of these and seeing that crackdown on that, or even software engineers and H1B stuff? Were you getting RFEs and pushback on that?
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, obviously the RFE rates increased, across the country, right? And denial rates too. And I'd say it's no exception for all the kind of household name tech companies that we've all heard of, right? Although I would say that their RFEs tend to get approved eventually.
Yeah.
So it just becomes like a more difficult process, right? But I mean, TNs have been hard even before Trump, I think, in my opinion. Like, I remember it really just depends on the port of entry.
Yeah.
Or the pre-flight clearance, office and kind of the state of affairs at that particular location. I've had to, work weekends on becoming TNs back in 2007. So it really just depends.
Yeah, that aspect of inconsistency at the pre-clearance port of how, or the port of entry, if you go to Pearson or Toronto or go to Vancouver, the differences in which officers handling it. If you go at nighttime, if you're daytime on the weekend, that inconsistency is so difficult that sometimes, especially for a management consultant or something like that, I beg the client just do USCIS premium processing, and at least that'll help. I mean, they can re-adjudicate at the border. But I'd rather USCIS on those kind of cases to have some backup to say, listen, they already looked at this. Please don't, because I've had management consultants, for example, extensions going at the port of entry of Canada, and they would call, a CBP officer would call like my client, and it's like they're in Canada, a guy went to the airport at 9, they'll call him at 6 a.m. in the morning asking for like tax documents. And like we had sent a lot of this stuff, and then the client thinks I messed up or asking for stuff that was above and beyond, or it was like, this company's making millions. We're on the internet. We have articles. Come on now. Like, do you need to nitpick on this stuff? Especially when it was an extension and you've been working there. So it's such a nightmare, but interesting. No matter how big you are or small you are, USCIS is USCIS, DHS is DHS. Right. You're going to deal with consular process deals. It's the same all around. I think sometimes I feel like the name may help, like if you're for the legitimacy of the company. But I've done EB1A extraordinary ability where we have to prove that the person was top person for a top company, just to paraphrase that criteria. And like, I wouldn't go into the top company as a description because I thought the brand name would have sold itself. And they'll come back in the RFE. It's like, well, you haven't proven this is a established organization. I'm like, dude, everyone knows this company is a multi-billion-dollar company. So I have to go and print like newspaper articles and their NASDAQ stock chart just to satisfy them. But you never know. They're always going to push back, and if they want to. It's so inconsistent.
Yeah, for sure.
So you've started your own firm. Tell us about the transition now that you're essentially a solo working. It's a restart. Do you plan on growing big, or what is the plans right now with your current firm called Banyan Labs?
Yeah, no, it's been a lot of fun. It's been only about 6 months or so, maybe even a little less. So I'm still trying to figure things out. I've worked in a company, and I've been, obviously in leadership positions there. But there were a lot of people around me, a lot of smart people who were really helpful, right? And I don't necessarily have that now. And so it's really challenging, but I asked for that challenge and I'm really enjoying it. And so, I don't know if I really fully define what my long-term plans are yet. I'm kind of taking it as it goes, right? I think I prefer to stay smaller rather than bigger, honestly. And there's nothing wrong with big. In fact, you need big if you have a big client
Yeah.
and you want resources and you want kind of global expertise and those kinds of things. But at this point in my life, I'm just kind of more comfortable with the idea of being small, nimble, agile, and being able to do different things when I decide to, which is the whole reason why I started my own company. So.
I guess working at a big firm, it's like demanding hours wise, isn't it? There's a lot of stuff you got to watch out for.
I think I wouldn't say that. I mean, I think that's a common conception with big firms across legal fields, right? I mean, my experience was at Pearl that it wasn't necessarily like that, right? And maybe that was just Pearl. I don't really know because I haven't worked at any other big firm. But I feel like maybe you probably put a lot of hours. You're doing all these podcasting and a lot of work that you're doing. And I think maybe it's just like the nature of how you work could be different, but the amount of time that you spend could be about the same, right? So maybe you're spending a lot more time in the office, right? At a big firm. But at the end of the day, we're all working hard and we're all putting in time.
After we talked, I started setting up on the big firm structures of immigration. I talked to some other attorneys that are in that niche area as well. And one thing I learned about it was the idea of accounting firms trying to get in on the immigration game, and how some foreign firms got accounting firms trying to get around the rules of attorneys working with accountants. What is your perspective on that, and because it's such a game changer if we get non-lawyers involved? And I want to talk about that idea. It's not unrelated to lifting, but it's something that's been on my mind because the California bar, for example, is trying to make it so that technology companies could start practicing immigration law even though they're not lawyers. And so once we get business people coming in, that's going to drastically change the legal landscape, especially for immigration lawyers, but all law, to have business people involved. And it's 1,000,001 issues that pop up, and it's going to destroy the old system, a whole new system get up. But like you saw that, and probably when those somewhat mergers or groupings happen, you felt that is solid. What is your perspective, and what's from your perch of how that worked out?
Yeah, no, good question. In my view, it's already happening. So it's not a matter of like what will it be like when it happens. I think we're in the middle of it right now, and I think, and it's not just immigration law. I think kind of law as a practice is completely changing. And you're having many more technology companies kind of coming in and doing, taking away a lot of the kind of like repetitive work that lawyers or their staff would do. But I think the biggest driver is like kind of what does the client or what does the customer want, right? And I think it's less of a thing to be a lawyer in the eyes of the customer than it used to be, right? I'm not talking about immigration law. I'm just talking about like in law in general.
Yeah.
Like maybe we're just viewed as another kind of expert in our respective fields, right? As opposed to being a kind of quote unquote lawyer. So I feel like on a high level, that has a lot to do with the changes that are happening. But yeah, I think, and as it relates to accounting firms, I mean, for sure, you have the big four are really kind of sensing, an opportunity to kind of work. They're already working with a lot of companies on the tax and kind of global mobility side, right, of things. And so they work with the same people that are often managing the global immigration programs of large companies. And so it would make sense for them to kind of offer kind of a comprehensive package, right, to these companies. Like the only problem is they're not lawyers, right? It's supposed to be a lawyer to practice law in the US. So, they work, they have firms in Toronto and maybe Vancouver that are close by to the US, but are not kind of under the jurisdiction of US law. And they practice US immigration out of there. And so I know some companies that work with the big four out of those offices. But yeah, I definitely think it's the future. And I think we as lawyers need to get used to the idea that our practices are going to start becoming slightly less regulated from the perspective of you have to be a lawyer to own a law firm. I think that's going to change.
Yeah, that's going to be crazy. And that kind of goes to marketing and branding. One thing I did in creating the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox and the Immigration Lawyers podcast is associate my name with the immigration lawyer. It's kind of a psychological tool, because one way I saw it is, IKEA got involved in furniture business and wiped out a lot of the mom and pop furniture stores and the corporate aspect. but there's still these high-end furniture makers that charge a lot of money to make unique kind of tools and unique, couches or beds or whatever. And so if I'm providing high-end concierge kind of immigration service, there's always that niche that I could take part in and get paid well for. But it is going to decimate a lot of the people who are middle of the road, are not charging a lot, or aren't doing like great, don't develop a name for themselves as a top lawyer, immigration lawyer. They're going to get wiped out as businesses get in and legal Zooms get in and various products are coming in to wipe out. I mean, they're trying to make immigration is so personal. There's always a need for a person to handle it. But at the end of the day, if that person is going to charge 10 times as much or 5 times as much as some computer software, then people are going to go for the computer software for the most part. Like for O1s, I've seen a lot of people doing software in family-based marriage kind of cases. There's a lot of these things that they're trying to chip away at. Removal defense, that's going to be harder because you got to go to court. But I'm like you, my skill I saw wasn't in litigation and going to court every day. It was more in strategy and talking with clients. And so, people want to pay less. So they're going to opt in, a section of them at least, are going to opt into these technologies. And that's something to think down the line. I think there's going to be a place for immigration lawyers, but know what your place is if you plan on, making a living and continuing it.
No, I totally agree with that. I don't want to give the impression that I think there are going to be less immigration lawyers needed, right? I just think that the nature of how we do our work is going to change. And so it's really good to kind of think about how are you going to adapt as a lawyer to what the future is going to hold, right? Across the legal field, the repetitive tasks, the tasks that maybe you don't necessarily need a lawyer to do, those are the ones that you can start considering, like how are you going to outsource those, or how are you going to use technology to help you with that? And really kind of work hard on the part that you're talking about, which is the advisory stuff, the consultative stuff. That's the part that you can never replicate. And that's where our true value as immigration lawyers lie.
I mean, part of our job is psychology, where people want to call and complain, and not complain, cry and worry and stuff. And you just got to be like, no, we'll get through it and stuff. I mean, that's just a human element that you can't get rid of. But can you, charge tons of money for that? And maybe yes, maybe no. I'll have to see how that works out. So with regards to just immigration law, there's a lot of talk about reform. Last night they had the Democratic candidates talking about stuff. I mean, their focus is primarily on the border and asylum kind of stuff. But with your specialty in employment-based and corporate-based immigration, what are some, if there was 1 or 2 things that you could change that would just benefit the system and the country? What kind of stuff would bother you about the system you'd like to change?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. But I think high level, there just needs to be more of an acknowledgement of the role of entrepreneurs in our country. And I'm just speaking personally. I know a ton of people who are immigrants, like literally high skilled immigrants, maybe on H's or whatnot, who are starting companies and creating jobs, and like the amount of fear and uncertainty that they feel in their lives because there's really no true solution for them, and no true stability and security for them and their families, to me is not just unfair and inhumane, but it's shooting ourselves in the foot as a country, because I mean, these are the people that are starting incredible companies, and they're incredibly brilliant. And so something like the entrepreneur parole that Obama administration put into place, I think would be really, really great for our country to.
There's so many F1 MBA students or graduate students, or even college students who might get a year's worth of OPT, but after that, I mean, if they're going to get picked on H-1B, who knows? Probably not statistically. So they might have rich families or rich investors, and they're like stuck. Maybe they could pull an E-2 off if they're from the right country and the investment's right. But that doesn't, there's so many people from India, China, Brazil, Russia that aren't going to get in the E-2 program. So all of a sudden they're like, I got to get married or got to do asylum or something. But most of them, have to go back home. And it's so stupid to invest that much in their education in these high institutions and then just send it back home. If we're thinking about being competitive on a geopolitical and even defense level, why take away the best minds and just train them and then send it back to our competitors? It absolutely doesn't make any sense in our policy to do it like that.
I mean, I totally agree. And I think that idea of, extending dual intents to F1 students is a great idea. And if they get an advanced degree, the Staple Act idea of just stapling a green card to their diploma, I think makes total sense to me. But I honestly don't give it a lot of thought. I didn't even watch the debate last night because I get so stressed out with the politics that are going on right now. And I don't have a lot of confidence that anything will be done with such a hot button topic, right? In the eyes of the population, immigration is one thing, right? And we know there's so many different aspects to it,
Yeah.
so many different, small areas that you can improve on. But really, are we going to get any energy on doing that? I feel pretty pessimistic about it. And I'm generally an optimistic person.
Yeah, I don't watch these anymore. And I studied poli-sci. I was so into politics when I was younger. But now it's like I realized it was a waste of time. But my wife was watching it, and like I put my headphones in so I wouldn't listen. But I hear some parts of it. But yeah, it's this idea of comprehensive immigration reform. It's like a thing that people that are politicians or non-immigration lawyers say. But integration is so complicated. They're going to mess up everything if they do comprehensive immigration reform. How are you going to go into INA 245A and the 8 nuances of like, a 212 and like for inadmissibility and like tweak these little things? Like people don't even understand that. And Congress is not going to sit and learn this stuff. They pass these laws that are like 2,000 pages without reading it. So I think the devil is kind of better than the devil you don't know. At most, maybe piecemeal corrections, which will have problems because this infrastructure is so complicated. You change one part, it has drastic effects on the other that you don't even realize until it comes out later. So my idea is just trash the whole system and just come and go. But it doesn't seem like it's going to happen. Another thing is the issues with the visa bulletin and things occurring. You were talking about this earlier about the issues that exist and what effect it has on people just not coming here.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's legislation pending right now. Hopefully, I think it's got bipartisan support, and really, it should be a no-brainer to pass it. But we have to do something about the massive backlogs in the EB category. So it's stretching across EB1 now. It's everywhere. And I personally know tons of really talented Indian nationals, for example, who have retained Canadian counsel and are actively looking at ways that they can move there. Mm-hmm. And so, I think it's almost a categorical imperative for this country to figure this out because the backlogs are so tremendous.
Mm-hmm. I just want to end with some more about what kind of things you're interested in doing with Banding Labs and stuff, because that's a creative name that you chose. It's not a typical name you have for a law firm, but it's cool that you did that. It really comes out from a different perspective. What kind of activities have you been doing with your firm in the last 6 months?
No, thanks. Well, one piece of advice I got from a friend who is a pretty well-known founder of a startup. When I was talking about starting my own company, he's like, don't give it your traditional law firm name. Mm-hmm. Like, give it a company name, because then you won't be limited in what you can do, right? And I thought that was really, really good advice because kind of in keeping with where I think the industry is going. Like, we're not just lawyers anymore, and it's a good thing. We can do a lot more with what we know. Like, we can consult, we can be expert advisors, we can start technology companies, we can do all sorts of different things, right? And so the opportunities are endless there, and I'm certainly considering kind of where I want to go. Kind of like you, for example, right? I mean, you're creating a continuing legal education program, and you're podcasting, and I think that's fantastic, right? And so I kind of wanted to do the same thing, and considering a couple of other options, mostly. How can I just help people, individuals? Like, I know employment-based, that's kind of where my knowledge base is. I don't know much else within the world. And so I just want to be as helpful as I can to high-skilled immigrants in this country. And I'm currently looking at
You're in the location for it up north, so you're sticking. The cool thing, people always think immigration is all removal defense or something, but when you're in San Francisco, even Los Angeles, New York, there's so many high-skilled immigrants, H-1B, O-1, all this kind of stuff in various employment-based, even EU-1As a lot of the time. It's there. We need to help these people because they're like going to create the future of this country. I mean, like the big, Dow Jones. 10 or 100, I don't even hear about Dow Jones anymore, but whoever's on top of the NASDAQ, chances are they got an H-1B first before they became the CEO, or they were an F1. Sure. I'll put my money on it. So the top 5, at least 4 of them would be, which is how it's been. So it's a really special thing we're doing for the country. I think it's a blessed job to be in, to be able to do this kind of stuff, to improve it. Because as you know, what happens in San Francisco or Silicon Valley hits the whole world and affects like the future of mankind. So we're literally affecting the future of mankind with the kind of work we're doing here. It's that grandiose. We don't think about it on a day-to-day level, and it seems kind of over the top, but it really is. I mean, you have one client that does a discovery, what the Google guys that think are immigrants, and like all these, and Google changed the world, and they're running the world. Everyone talks about this, but Steve Jobs' dad was Syrian. his dad, his birth father, would have been travel ban right now, and Apple.
Right.
Steve Jobs would have been born in Syria, running away from bombs right now, and not be able to create Apple, which changed everyone's life. And this recording is done on in Apple headphones and Apple computer right now.
Right.
So,
Well, we're also on a Zoom, right? And Zoom was started by a Chinese immigrant who's I think allegedly his visa was denied 8 times before he was let into the country.
Oh wow, I didn't know that. That's it.
So yeah. So the examples are all around us.
Wow. Well, thanks so much for coming on the program, Samir. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way they can look you up? And do you have any social media handles?
Sure. Well, I'm on my website. It's banyonlabs.com, and my email is samir@banyonlabs.com. I'm taking a little bit of a hiatus from Twitter just to kind of de-stress for a little while, but you can look me up at Khedekar, Khedekar is my handle at Khedekar. And I'm also on LinkedIn under my name.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Okay. Thanks, John.
All
right.
Bye-bye.